Y'all, something ain't right at Fort Hood, and in fact, there's like a lot of things not right. Past, present, and probably future. So today, we're going to be going over a bunch of things in this video. So we're going to be talking about the case of Vanessa Guillen. I'm going to be reviewing the criminal complaint against Cecily Augilar, who was the suspect's girlfriend who helped get rid of Vanessa. Now, I'm going to also talk about some past scandals at Fort Hood that when I learned them research and I was like, what? We're also going to be talking a little bit about Gregory Morales, another Fort Hood soldier who went missing and his remains were found while looking for Vanessa. So buckle up and let's get into it. April 22nd, Vanessa Guillen disappears. All of her stuff, like her car keys, identification card, stuff like that, it's all found in an arms room on base where she was working. When they go through her phone records and they see, the last person that she talks to is this guy named Aaron David Robinson. Now, he's also another soldier there on the base. So now the criminal complaint goes in to say that witnesses said that when they saw Guillen leave the arms room where she was at, she went to another arms room in another part of the base that was controlled by Robinson. She was going over there to confirm serial numbers on weapons and equipment. Now, a quick side note, interesting thing on Robinson, a family attorney for the Guillens is saying that, look, you know what, Vanessa had plans on reporting him for harassment the next day after she died. So that's very telling. Now they're saying that they believe what happened is that Robinson became enraged when he found out this information. Now Vanessa's sister said, look, she didn't report any of this stuff up until then because basically she was afraid to. She was afraid to come forward with this information. She was afraid of being ridiculed. She was afraid of being blackballed. She basically was like, look, she was afraid that nobody was going to take it seriously because they don't take it seriously. It's basically a joke. At a recent press conference, an Agent Phelps was essentially like, well, look, there's no credible information that this harassment was going on. And he said basically like, look, investigators like went over like 300 interviews and we're just not seeing any credible, information coming forward about this. Well, okay. Fort Hood is has a history of this kind of stuff. So that aspect, I'm just like, that doesn't mean anything. How do, we don't know this. It could have been just between her and him. You know what I'm saying? So that part doesn't hold too much water with me. Back to the day of the crime. So yes, phone records show the last text sent from Vanessa's phone is to this Robinson's guy. Clearly he is on the radar. So on the 22nd, Robinson's basically like, look, he said that he texted her to say, look, I'm in the arms room, and she came over to like read serial numbers for this equipment and these weapons and whatnot, and then he gave her some paperwork, and he was saying like, well, I was assuming she was going to the motor pool to drop off this paperwork, and then the motor pool's basically like, well, she never showed up here. So this is when it's like, okay, well, where is she? Something happened, she's gone missing. So fast forward about 6 days on the 28th. So he says that he went to his residence that he shared with this lovely young lady named Cecily Augilar, and basically he was there and he didn't leave again, and the only time he did leave was like around 6:30 because essentially he had to go enroll in some training programs that he could only do from like the government computers. So he went to base and then came back. So interesting that he's trying to cover that little bit of his tracks. So again, fast forward to May 18th. So two witnesses on base were just like, you know what, we saw him on the 22nd. He was loading up a tough box, like this big box. It looked super duper heavy. He was getting it from the arms room where he was working, loading it into his vehicle, and then he left. So May 19th, the day after that, Robinson's like, yeah, you can look at my phone. Well, y'all already know. This is when things don't really add up. There's all these text messages to his girlfriend, Cecily Augilar. She is the estranged wife of a former Fort Hood soldier. Now, these phone calls are on the night of 4/22, the night Vanessa goes missing, the night that he claims he went back home and was there all evening except for around 6:30. Now, some of these calls are like 3:30 a.m. on the 23rd, so this is like an overnight type thing. So later when Augilar is interviewed, the investigators ask the obvious question. They're like, well, if the two of y'all are together, why is he blowing your phone up? And she's like, oh, you know what? I couldn't find my phone, so he was calling it to, locate it between the seat cushions or something. Well, very easily, all you have to do is look at the length of the phone calls and they're like, yeah, that's not how that works. Let's try again. So then fast forward in another interview, she's like, okay, so maybe that wasn't the truth. Maybe that wasn't the truth. So she's like, okay, you know what? Maybe we weren't home, yada, yada, yada. One of my coping mechanisms is to, go on these long rides and whatnot. And so, yeah, I was with him that evening, but we went on this ride to go look at the stars. And this was to a park in Belton, Texas. this. So the criminal complaint goes into some more details about the phone data and all that kind of stuff. Well, y'all, as we all know, this puts them right at the scene of the disposal. I mean, damn near walking them right up to where the burial site was. So investigators get this information, and they're just like, okay, so they literally just follow the trail. And they go there, and what it does is it leads them to the spot where they find essentially a melted tough box. You know, that box that they were seen transporting. There's a heavy smell of decomposition, but they cannot find any remains at this point. Now, this is June 21st. So then June 30th, fast forward a little bit, some contractors that were working on a fence, they find human remains. Now these remains appear to have been put in some kind of concrete, and so again, this is like exactly the area where their phone pings were, where they were tracking their phone in the whole 9 yards. So June 30th is when they find these remains. Later that evening, June 30th, is when the girlfriend, Aguilar, is like, okay, I might have a few things to say. Now, y'all, this is a trigger warning because I'm going to read verbatim the next lines of the criminal complaint here, because there's really just nothing else you can do but this. The absolute horror of this, I'm just like, what is going on in the world? It blows my mind. So just be forewarned that this is not so pretty. On the evening of 4/22/2020, or the early morning of 4/23/2020, Robinson picked Aguilar up at a gas station she worked at and took her out to a site near the Leon River and near a bridge. A box with wheels and handles was already at this site. SPC Robinson walked Aguilar over to the woods and opened up a box for Aguilar, and she saw a dead female inside the box. Aguilar, on a later date, identified the dead female as Vanessa Guillen. To more easily dispose of and to conceal the body of the dead female, Robinson and Aguilar proceeded to dismember the dead female's body. They used a hatchet or axe and a machete-type knife. They removed the limbs and the head from the body. Robinson and Aguilar attempted to burn the body. However, the body would not burn completely. They placed the dead female in 3 separate holes and covered up the remains. SPC Robinson and Aguilar returned to the site on a later date. This date was believed to be on 4/26/2020, according to a cellular telephone site analysis. Prior to their return, they obtained hairnets and gloves. Aguilar purchased a bag of what she referred to as concrete from someone utilizing Facebook Messenger. On that date, Robinson and Aguilar uncovered the remains of the dead female, removed them, and continued the process of breaking down the remains of the dead female. The remains were then burned again along with their gloves and hairnets. As Robinson and Aguilar placed the remains back in the 3 holes with the concrete purchased earlier, Robinson and Aguilar burned their clothes later that night at their residence. Robinson and Aguilar concocted the story about Aguilar and Robinson taking a long drive to a park in Belton as an alibi. Now, y'all, that is some Texas Chainsaw Massacre stuff right there. To think that, imagine like this, like, imagine being his co-worker, like, just some random person that passes him, whatever. This human being is capable of this. I mean, the manner of death for poor Vanessa was horrific. I mean, he bludgeoned her to death. And that's a whole other thing right there about the crime scene. There was blood everywhere. How he cleaned this up in this short amount of time, I mean, that's a whole other video, y'all. So, be prepared. So now, June 30th. So remember, the remains are found. Aguilar comes clean. June 30, Robinson is like, I am outie. As you can imagine, at this point, Aguilar is helping, the cops and the investigators. So she plays some, recorded phone calls to Robinson. He doesn't deny that any of this stuff happened. So, he's on the run. Now, the authorities catch up with him in Killeen, Texas. And, once they've got him, he's on foot, whatever, they're going to go confront him, and he pulls a gun out and blows his head off, basically. Clearly, there's going to be a lot to be uncovered with this, with the potential harassment, with how this was handled, with other incidences of this guy. So that's going to be ongoing. Now, obviously, the girlfriend, Aguilar, is holding the key to a lot more information, because there's just a lot of unanswered questions. How did this escalate to such a horrific crime? Again, how was she so willing, and why was she so willing to go along with such a grisly cover-up? Now, she obviously is in custody, thank God. Now, she's been hit with a charge that's very similar to something we've seen in the news with Miss Lori Vallow, Daybell, whatever you want to call her, with the count of conspiracy to tamper, destroy evidence, that type thing. So, I mean, y'all, hopefully this girl ain't going nowhere. So, remember how earlier I talked about, the harassment thing, and that Vanessa was going to come forward, and this is possibly what instigated this whole situation? Okay, so y'all, the rabbit hole on this is intense. So Major General Scott Eflin has requested an investigation of Fort Hood's sexual harassment, assault response, and prevention program. Basically, he wants to, have this looked into to see, is there a culture of people being able to come forward with things? But here's the thing, y'all, this exact program, not that long ago, like 2015, 2016, y'all, the drama, the scandal, the tea with this was like, what? So former Sergeant First Class Gregory McQueen, he used to be a battalion rep for part of this team. Well, it turns out that this guy was basically running like a prostitution ring, exploiting, vulnerable female soldiers who were like strapped for cash essentially. At Fort Hood. Now, y'all, when this scandal unearthed, I mean, it was bad, y'all. I mean, he was like using information that he got to like manipulate and groom women to make them comfortable into, going along with this trafficking. Now, he was looking at like a ton of time, like 40 years, but he copped a deal. And he ended up only serving 2 years. Now, he did plead guilty to like a dozen or so charges related to this. Clearly, he got a dishonorable discharge, lost his retirement, all that kind of stuff. So, with poor Vanessa coming out talking about, I didn't feel there was this culture that could come out and yada yada yada, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and believe her on that one. Now, another interesting tidbit on Gregory McQueen is in 2017, him and his wife were approved by a foster agency to take in children and foster them. Y'all, you cannot make it up. Why did that happen, you might ask? How in God's name did that happen, you might ask? Well, I'm about to tell you. The Army failed to submit his criminal past, his criminal charges, to the FBI. So when this foster agency place, did their background check, it never showed up. And I'm like, is that conveniently forgot to do, or just a simple mistake? Because either way, y'all know here how much of this true crime stuff we watch and how many situations involve children being put into the system, going to foster parents and stuff, and I'm like, yeah, personally, I have a problem with a child, let alone a damn adult, being around this man who has utilized this position in the Army to exploit women. I'm like, and he got approved for this? Are you kidding? Clearly, that made the headlines. So now, y'all, another tragic part to this case is when all this is going on, there's another soldier from Fort Hood who was missing. His name was Gregory Morales. Now, this is not anything to do with the other Gregory. This is a totally different guy. And this guy, I mean, it's so sad, and I'm just like, what is going on here? Why is this all happening around here? Y'all, he was scheduled to be discharged within days of his disappearance. So he had plans to go to technical school in Galveston or Houston, and, he was gonna, continue bettering himself. He was gonna use his experience in the Army and, continue growth. He wanted to work on big windmills. Now, his remains were found about 26 miles away from where the remains of Vanessa were found. Now, so far the investigators are saying, there's no evidence linking these two cases together, anything like that. I mean, I don't think they're probably either. I mean, I could totally be wrong, but just the fact that it's how does this happen? I mean, why do bodies keep popping up? I mean, what is going on at Fort Hood? If you want to watch some more of my commentary on different cases, check out this playlist right over here. I appreciate you watching, and I'll talk to you soon.